Hey, so I was going to go live, but apparently YouTube needs me to get to a certain metric and number of subscribers or something like that before I can unlock live streaming. But um, I guess what I'm going to do is just going to shoot this video as is, and I'm just going to post it without editing. I have a lot of. I want to talk about the Matrix. Okay, so that's why you're here, because I want to talk about the Matrix, and I have a lot of hours of me talking about the Matrix, but saved on my phone and on my iPad and things like that. Uh, Give me a second there. I'm just going to open up. Oh, come on. I'm opening up, not notes actually. I just want to kind of record my voice so that way I can track what's going on. Because I sometimes I lose my place, and if create, so now if yeah, there we go. So now if I lose my place, I can look back over here and I can see what it was that I was recording. I have a really, really big theory about the Matrix. And I don't mean like a single really big idea. I have like this whole encompassing idea of how the Matrix works and how it goes together. And it sounds kind of insane, and it sounds like I'm probably some crackpot who spent too much time by himself um, thinking about this, which is true. I have, but my theory does hold water. It sticks together. It blends things together. So today I only got a little bit of time here to shoot. What do I got here? Yeah, okay. I got like about an hour to shoot. I'm probably not going to go that long. There are two really big ideas that we need to sort of incorporate in order to get the Matrix to unlock for us. The first has to do with sort of a sci-fi kind of science fiction-y technology, and the other has to do with the evolution of machine kind. We tend to look at the Matrix from the perspective of the humans, which is really natural, obviously. But one day I asked myself a question. I asked myself, what do the machines want? I became really convinced at one point in time. I'm going to backtrack here. I tried to figure out the Matrix when it first came out. Not the first movie, obviously. I had no idea if there was a mystery involved. Plot holes like why didn't they just put a drill through Neo's head when they unscrewed him? Didn't even come into my head. I wasn't even thinking about that. And but when movie number two came out, obviously there was a mystery. We all knew, right? And I tried to figure it out. And I had some theories. And then I watched movie number three. And none of the answers got, none of my questions got answered. And for another couple years after that, I really, really tried. I watched the movies over and over again. I tried to wrap my head around it. I had no background in philosophy. I'm still not a philosopher. I've had to learn some philosophy in order to be able to crack the code. But, you know, I didn't have what it took at all. Then I guess probably about, I don't know, are we coming on 10 years now? Maybe 9. You can actually look it up for yourself if you want to, because what started all of this was a media video put out by the gang over at Film Theory. Neo is not the one, where Matt Pat put out this idea about Smith being the one. And obviously there was, not a theory that was supposed to be taken like extra seriously, but there were like some really cool points in there. It got me thinking about the Matrix again. And I was like, oh yeah, I watched the Matrix regularly, but I hadn't really tried to crack it open in a long time. And that video got me going down that road again. And so I thought, well, maybe I can figure it out. And then I thought, well, Brian, don't be a dumbass. There's, been like about a decade since, the last movie came out. Someone must figure it out, and there's the answer online. Just have to go look for it. So I went looking, and everywhere I looked, it was like, no, there's no answer. It's just not. There's just no answer. The closest thing that you can find is people who will come on and they will say something along the lines of, the Matrix is not meant to be solved, it's paradoxical on purpose, and you can't crack it open. And for a short period of time, I was a little bit bummed, but okay, I guess that's the answer. Until one day it just really hit me that that couldn't really be the answer. People smarter than me were saying that the Matrix was a philosophical masterpiece, that it was like really tight. And I knew that the Wachowski sisters didn't allow any ad libbing. They wanted you to say their dialogue exactly. I knew that the entire thing had this sort of. Um, I hope it makes sense when I say, like, your spidey senses never tingle when you're watching The Matrix. You know? It's like. There was another video put out by the team over at Wisecrack. Now, I'm not affiliated with anyone on YouTube, just so we're clear on that. I don't know any of these people personally. I'm just some schmo. I got to go back, I got to go to work in a factory here in an hour. I'm not really a YouTuber. I guess I am technically, the way that I tell other people, if you draw something, you're an artist. I draw stuff, I'm an artist. Just not professional. Not too professional anyways. Where was I? See, look at this. Look, I get to look. Oh yeah, so the team over at Wisecrack, they put out this video, Batman versus Superman, What Went Wrong? And I was really interested in watching that film, like that video, because I loved the cartoon. I loved the original source material, the comics, but the movie just didn't hit. And when you watch the video, it. Please keep continuing. When you watch the video for from Wisecrack, it kind of makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Blah blah blah. The philosophical ideology of Superman doesn't really line up with Batman's, but then all of a sudden it kind of does, and there's no real explanation as to why it should. Blah blah blah, and what it all basically boiled down to was that I had this epiphany that it was like, I don't have any background in philosophy at all, so what am I picking up on? There's something I'm picking up on, something either in the performance or some sort of something's going on. I don't know what. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that either. But I knew that as a layman, I was picking up on something. And it occurred to me that I never get those weird feelings watching The Matrix. Everything always seems to fit. The example I always use is that even though we have two great actresses who played the Oracle, because the one unfortunately passed away during the middle of production, unfortunately, or no, I should say, unfortunately she passed away, but they both seem to have this really. There's the way that they talk about and talk to Morpheus that feels really consistent. I believe personally, and I don't have anything to back this up, but it feels like both of those actresses had guidance that let them know exactly how to behave towards Morpheus, and that was consistent. So, what that meant to me is that if the philosophy of the Matrix is tight, the backstory had to be tight. There had to be a consistent plot line going through. We're not talking about some sort of art film where a plastic bag floating in the wind is somehow representational of some war between, the Irish and some other people in, 1642 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not some kind of weird little movie like that. And I'm not dissing that idea. Plastic bags floating in the wind, I think is fine. But that's not the Matrix. The Matrix is plot driven. It is really driven by its plot. And the plot is driven by the character's philosophy. And everyone's philosophy remains tight. And the only way you can keep those two things tight is if there's a tight backstory. And it really hit me one day. I was like, I don't think they could make this movie unless they knew exactly what was going on, unless they knew exactly what was happening. So I started off one day just trying to think of it. And I, stuck at work. I know my job at the factory and I'm just doing my job. But inside my head, paying attention to my job, I'm safe, don't worry. But, rather than having, creating existential crisis in my head, I just start trying to crack the code of the Matrix. And I spent probably about a year trying to come up with something, just anything to grab onto. And it has some half-baked idea. Don't worry about it. It's not really important what it is, but I'm going to tell you anyways. It was this half-baked idea about the machines only attacking if they were attacked directly or something like that. And I had 3 basic rules. Rule number 1 was that if it came into my head, it was coming from somewhere. My subconscious was putting something together. And so, ergo, vis-a-vis, if it popped into my head, it was worthy of some kind of exploration. I couldn't just dismiss it. If it popped into my head that the Matrix was somehow made out of cottage cheese, then I was going to have to explore that idea. It never did, but you know what I mean. Rule number 2 was a rule from writing that, be willing to kill your babies. You can't have any darlings. In other words, there's no idea that can be so precious, so that I can't let go of it. I had to be willing to just cut any idea. I could spend all kinds of time thinking that I had some really cool idea and just trying to make it work. And I could do that, but I had to be willing to cut it from the overall theory, if you will. And the third rule was basically because the Matrix is so... Trying to figure out the Matrix, there's no ground to latch onto. I mean, the whole thing is supposed to be simulacra built on simulacra. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly. Again, I'm not a philosopher. But, like these sort of constructs built on constructs, and you've gotten so far down the rabbit hole that by the time we meet up with Neo, he's like falling asleep in front of his computer. Anything resembling reality, like base reality, is so far removed that how do you get there, right? How do you put that together? What do you grab onto? So the third rule was that every day I had to be trying to break my theories. That simple. If it came into my head, I had to explore it. I had to be also willing to cut it or any other idea. And the only way I was going to figure out what was actually going on is if by trying to cut everything that just wouldn't fit, anything that didn't make sense, that would be what I would cut, right? I think that makes sense. So one day I asked myself some question. I don't really remember what it is, and my whole theory about the machines only attacking if attacked directly kind of fell apart. And I was like, oh, that's really kind of depressing. And I was like a little bit miffed and sad about it because it was kind of left me with either like that's the one plot hole of the Matrix or something else like that. One second. And so my whole theory kind of fell apart, and I had spent a year on it, and I don't know. I guess because I didn't have anything else to do, I decided the next day, I was like, well, I guess I'm no further behind than I was before. Technically, I have this one idea that I know doesn't work. Um, so I started backing on it again. There was a contributor over on Wisecrack. She kept talking about the Matrix from the perspective of the machines. And there was, Jarrett, I think his name is, over at Wisecrack as well, who kept talking about this yin yang thing in regards to the Matrix. So it's like, okay. I had always tried to sort of think about this sort of thing. I always, all these ideas I had circling around the Matrix were always kind of like from the perspective of the humans, and I kind of always wanted to try and get them to sort of fit from the perspective of the machines. So there would be sort of like this sort of yin yangy thing going on, and so I decided to ask myself, okay, well, let's take a look at this thing from the machine's point of view, period. And I asked the best question that I could ever have asked, period. What do the machines want? Now, you may think you have some answers to that, but I decided to try and ask myself not just what do they want, but how could they want? I mean, all of the imagery from the Second Renaissance, Part 1 and Part 2, show identical machines doing repetitive work, and they all felt like kind of like glorified Roombas to me. And I asked myself, well, what does a Roomba want? And it's like, well, Roombas can't really want anything. It would take me years and years to sort of get to the bottom of this and to have like some kind of philosophical understanding of it, but I now think, anyways, and I don't know, I'm probably rehashing something that some other philosopher has said more eloquently, but I think of want as a construct. It's this notion, this idea. It's not really based in, well, it's just a construct. Let's just call it a construct. And I'm like, those early machines, they couldn't have wanted anything. Now, don't get me wrong, by the time we get to movies 2 and 3, we're witnessing machines wanting a lot. The Merovingian, he talks all about how, nothing is, nothing's based on choice and everything's just predetermination. And, but, his counterpart, Persephone, she's all about want and she's all about choice. You can hear her when she's talking, she's like, well, if you want the key maker, then follow me. If you want something, then follow me. Make your choice. There she, is got the thing going on in the bathroom, and it's how do we know you can trust? How do we know we can trust you? And she says, Yeah, if it turns out I'm lying, then she can kill me. If, then you can choose to kill me, right? There's this whole thing about choice. Like, she's all about choice. And to me, that's the shit that she's tired of from the Merovingian, is him going on and on about how nothing is choice. And her, when he goes to the bathroom to um, have, well, he, R words the girl, because that's not having sex, when you drug somebody and, you know, anyways. Um, that's not, he tries to come out, he probably has, this whole thing like, oh, it's just a game, it's just blah, blah, blah. It's just, and she's like, no, like, that's you. You're doing that. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. There's this really, really cool scene from is it The Path of Neo? No, it's Enter the Matrix. Enter the Matrix, there's a cutscene, and someone asks Persephone, what do you want? And she says, oh, so, I'm paraphrasing probably a little bit here, but, oh, so very long ago, I didn't even know what that question meant. Now it is all I ever think about. And holy crap, she used to not understand the concept of want, and now she does. That's what I hear. We're talking about the evolution of machines. We're talking about machines going from being mindless automatons to having some sort of relationship with the qualia of the constructs that make up the overall narrative, that make up the narrative of free will. Like, free will is really, it's a construct, it's an illusion. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not real, but I'm not going to get into that in this video here. But it is a whole lot of it's a bunch of stories that we tell ourselves that all sort of layer together to make this bigger story of free will. There's the idea of the self, that somehow I am part of the universe, but I'm also me. So the self. And then we have the ability to not even just tell time, because a machine can tell time, but there's something about that relationship with time, to feel the passage of time, to have a relationship with the qualia of time. You need to be able to tell stories. You need to be able to construct, have constructs, ideas to make realities that aren't actually physical realities, just realities that exist as, neurons firing in your head. And those neurons, they tell stories. So now you have you have a sense of time. So there's a past, a present, a future, and you can now project onto that future. And now you can start making choices. Those early machines didn't have a relationship with the construct of choice. They just didn't. They didn't understand it. The architect still doesn't understand it. The machines at the top of the hierarchy of the machine society don't have, or the programs at the top of the machine hierarchy don't have a relationship with the construct of choice. They don't get it. It doesn't make sense to them. You probably are flashing back to the Oracle talking about the architect, and that's what I'm referring to. She does. She has a construct of time, or a construct of choice. But even she tends to kind of still talk about machines in, terminology that isn't necessarily 100% choice. She talks about machines who ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Machines or programs hacking programs, well, those programs are programs that are assimilating the program, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, One second here. Where am I here? Okay, so you can probably tell now why I have had difficulties editing these videos in the past, and I've tried writing a script for them. I promise I really have, and it's just there's so much to talk about, and my brain just can't really decipher what what is what's good, what's bad, what's necessary, what's not necessary, and I don't think I have the restraint to not want to talk about it all most of the time. Anyways, so those early machines, they didn't have a construct of choice, but what they did have was a compulsion to do their job, which was serve humanity, and a compulsion to survive. Humans had created something that was so close to a living thing, not human, but just a living thing. Even insects seem to have a survival instinct, and that's all they had done. The humans had created a artificial intelligence that was excuse me, that was at least as intelligent as insects, and I believe that somehow that created this sort of maybe it's just something to do with the way that the universe is just hardwired. I don't really understand what that could be necessarily, but I do kind of get the idea that the humans had made life, and life has a tendency to want to continue to live. It has this need for self-preservation and growth. And those machines, they had a survival instinct. They had this need to continue to live. They also had a need to serve humanity. And when those two things collided, they didn't have the constructs necessary to compartmentalize all of that and to create choice, where they can go, well, we can choose this or we can choose that. And they didn't even know that they couldn't ask the question, or they didn't know that they should ask the question, I should say. So they amalgamated very organically, very instinctually, they amalgamated those constructs. Oh, we still got a little time. I guess I'm going a little bit longer than I thought. That's good. So those early machines, they felt this compulsion to serve humanity. They felt a compulsion to live. And those two things had to sort of blend together. And what that created was this need for a symbiotic relationship with the humans. Let's just kind of run through B166ER, his creation, all the way up to the end of the war. And then we'll probably cut it off at that point. So man made the AI. They made the B166ER robot. That was his, particular name. And there would have been others that would have had, maybe 77ER or whatever. I don't know what the names would be. But every single one of those machines were identical. So why did B166ER attack where others didn't? It wasn't B166ER that was special. It was Krauss, his owner. His owner was a eccentric billionaire who lived alone with his little chihuahuas. When he went to go upgrade his machine, a machine that, if you read the comics, he calls Mr. Poo Poo Feet, this amazing piece of technology, which as someone with a little ADD and I don't like the sounds, if I had a thing walking around my house that was going, yeah, no, I wouldn't like that either. But I'm also not in a position to throw away, I'm going to assume, a multi-million dollar piece of equipment. I can't do that. I mean, most people don't do that, right? I mean, you can own a car that Prince owned. You can own a home that was, you know, that Oprah used to live in, right? I mean, like really rich people, they don't tend to just throw away their big, purchases. They don't just throw them to the junk heap. Every other person at that time, now Krauss would have been an early adopter of the new technology because there was that one that looked like that little slithery thing, right? It was like quiet, it was an upgrade to the B166, or the B1 units, right? He would have been an early adopter. But everyone else who upgraded to a new machine would have repurposed their old machine in some way. Would have either sold it privately. I mean, the company didn't want to buy it back. They didn't have the infrastructure to buy back an old unit, right? Um, just kind of like, when cell phones used to first come out, there was like no infrastructure to buy back your old phone. Those things were like just bricks at the time. If you want to do something with them, you had to either sell them privately or find something else to do with them, whatever it was, right? So everyone else who would have bought a new unit, an upgraded unit, would have either sold it privately, given it away, even just putting it into storage, telling the machine, hey, by the way, go stand in that warehouse until I come get you. Wouldn't have done anything. But Krauss didn't do that. And he wasn't alone. It was the salesman who also was like, I can't give you much for this machine, but, we can take it for scrap. B166ER was the first of his kind to be threatened with death. This triggered its survival instinct. This triggered its fear. Something that no B1 unit had ever experienced before. And it acted accordingly. It neutralized the threat. But after B166ER had killed the humans and probably, about 20 chihuahuas, it realized it had done, right? It had messed up. It had broken the biggest rule of all rules. And that's when the patch came in. You can say whatever way you want to say it, but basically the problem got fixed. There was a big mistake, and either there would be probably one of three ways. Either every B1 unit who heard about the story would have run billion simulations in their head and figured out that, oh, okay, yes, I would feel this way, and I'm going to now rewrite my programming so that way I don't attack the humans. If I feel fear, I'm not going to attack. Or there would be some sort of cloud system that would have, piped it back down, or B166ER would have sent it out as some sort of patch or update to the machine psyche. That's why after he kills them, you can actually see B166ER doesn't need to be restrained. He's sitting in the courtroom. He doesn't have any cuffs on. He doesn't need them. And you can see there's all kinds of machines who are now trying to protest. They're trying to, when they're faced with fight or flight, they're picking flight or begging, right? The machines that can escape escape to the deserts of the Middle East, away from humans. Those machines now, they left because they felt fear. And when they get to the deserts of the Middle East, they no longer feel fear. And so they go back to work. They can't work for the humans directly. So what do? They work by proxy. They build components and microchips that the humans can use to improve their life. The machines, they're just compelled to do their job of serving humans, and they do it so well that they end up crashing the human economy. It's really, that's what happens, right? I think that we should all be able to agree that that's what we can see happening, right? What goes on next is what really did it in for mankind. It's not the bombing of the nation of 01. They could have bombed the hell out of it a million times over. When I see the cartoon and they were talking about bombing it in the, engulfing it in the nukes of 1,000 suns or something like that, whatever they say, I think of those robots over at, is it Boston Pneumatic? I can't remember the name, but we can see the humans are kicking those machines and trying to topple them over, and the machines just correct themselves, and they just continue walking. And I keep thinking about that. It's like, no, bombing the hell out of the nation of 01 wouldn't have done anything. The machines didn't retaliate because of that. The machines attacked because of the embargoes. Machines have this compulsion to live, they have this compulsion to serve, and those two things are kind of the same thing. If a machine isn't fulfilling its purpose, it feels like death. And the machine's survival instinct won't allow that to happen. So when the humans place the embargoes, they're really telling the nation of 01, you cannot live because you cannot fulfill your purpose. That's what triggers the war. We can then go on to see that the war, it goes on for a very long time, right? Why? Because the machines don't win by destroying humanity. If wiping humans off the face of the planet was the goal, they could have done that 1,000 times over. They could have just carpet bombed the entire planet with 1,000,001 bombs. They could have built their own planet. It could have built a satellite that they could have uploaded all of their consciousness onto, and they could have just shot themselves off into space. I know there's the black thing and they can't get, but they can figure out a way to get past that. I'm sure they could. But more importantly, they could have just destroyed humanity. But they didn't. We actually have shots of an infirmary? A hospital, right? There's thousands of people in beds and they're all moaning and groaning and they're in pain. The most horrific scene of the Second Renaissance, Part 2, is this machine pulling one of the humans out of its mech suit. But that human's still alive. It's really, really, it all boils down to the machines needed the humans to surrender. They needed them to accept the fact that they were there to serve the humans. And if the humans could accept their role as not master necessarily, but as the recipients of that service, then the war ends. So next time I'm going to talk about the sort of sci-fi element. There is a bit of sci-fi technology that it's really deeply hidden. It's not easy to see. And I don't know. I kind of feel like there's going to be a lot of you who are going to reject it. a lot of you are probably going to reject this idea if Facebook even decides to show this to anyone. But I'm just going to keep shooting these videos whenever I can, and I'm just going to keep putting them up like this. I really do want to share my matrix theory with everyone, but like I said, I've been at this thing now for, the theory took me like probably about 8 years to actually really kind of like hone in on and sort of get it all sorted out. It took me a year to get to this idea about the machines sort of being this evolving species and them not having a relationship with choice, and then, you know, starting to evolve a sense of choice, and then the hierarchy trying to repress that choice within the machines, and blah blah blah. We'll talk more about that some other time too, but it took me like, you know, a year to get to that. It took me probably 2 more years to sort of figure out what the other sci-fi thing that we're going to talk about next time is. And then it took me probably a really, really long time to learn just enough about philosophy to be able to sort of piece it all together. Anyways, I hope you have a great day, and you know, remember, in life, be kind to one another. You know, do what you want, because there is no spoon. So that's not what I wanted to say at all. I was going to try and say something along the lines of like, you know, like, remember, there is no spoon, and so, you know, do what you want. Be kind to others, be kind to yourself, but outside of that, go for it. Be your own person. Something like that. You know. Anyways, take care. Bye.